We have about a half hour to kind of try to wind down and round up the full day, and also I would say yesterday's discussion. And that's always kind of a challenge to do, especially with the kind of wide range of topics that we've been having up on the agenda here today. So first of all, I would just like to express a very genuine and deep gratitude to Peter Norvig for coming here, to being here with us. It is a fairly daunting task to do, and I've seen you sitting here all day and taking in the discussions. I don't think Peter Norvig really needs that much of an introduction. You all know where Peter Norvig is, and you also know his role and the impact in this MOOC discussion. But if you don't know, he works at a small startup company called Google. We all know that Keith Devlin here has been with us at our conferences for the last few years and hosting this one. So I would also like to express the same kind of gratitude to you, Keith, for being here and trying to round up this discussion with us. So I have a few questions to get this discussion going, and depending on how this works, we may at the end open up for a little intervention with the audience if there is time for it, but we aim to finish this roundup by 4 o'clock. All right? So I would first like to hear, I think, from you, Keith, just a general reflection, a couple of minutes, a few minutes, and sort of, what have you heard today? What are you coming away with from the conference today? It's an unfair question, I know, but they're all going to be unfair questions. Could you just sort of...
I should say that Olga mentioned last night that he was going to do this, and having seen this program come together, rather than do what I usually do, which is try to summarize the whole thing for my impression, I actually took notes, because I knew this was going to be all over the shop. And it has been over the shop. So I'm just going to go through some highlights of things, takeaways that I've noted down. These will reflect an academic perspective, as you will see from the kind of things I've noted down particularly. One was from last night, which not everybody was here. One of the things that came out of last night's discussion was there's a tendency when you have technological change to use the new technologies to do old things in new ways. That's the first wave. We're surely past that in education technology. What we should be doing now is using the technology to do new things that we could never do before. We have problems, we have goals we want to achieve, we have technologies with affordances. We should be matching those two together, not going via some old pedagogy, much of which was based on the printing press. Okay, that was from last night. Another one that came up from this morning was a remark that an awful lot of the money that's now into the billions of dollars that's going into EdTech each year, the investment money, very little of that's going into classroom pedagogy, classroom content. That needs to change, and there's a whole bunch of explanations one could give as to why that's the last one to do. Okay, skipping forward. Interesting remarks that Marty Hess made in her discussion about just the use of data analytics, natural language technologies, the need to develop online collaboration, to reflect on what we know about behavioural psychology and neuroscience. In other words, to get very scientific, very quantitative, very rational about how we collect the data and use it to influence what we're doing. Okay, skipping forward. Interesting remark that Adrian Sanya made about the fact that there's now an appetite, this is in academia, there is now an appetite to embrace the technologies and do things with them. I mean, the person sitting on my right, stage right here, is one of the people that innovated that with that first MOOC with Sebastian Thrun. It sort of created this, having a Stanford name does something, the world takes note, the New York Times writes about it, and that sort of created this atmosphere in which there's a readiness to embrace technology. So that's been an extremely valuable thing. Marty Hurst again mentioned in the context of the technologies, do we actually need courses? Are courses something that's sort of a hangover from the days when things came from textbooks with chapters and pages and so forth? What I still note down. Not only Adrian mentioned this, and other people did later. was the need for support, human support when you've got people working with technology. When you have a person in front of a screen doing things, that person's almost certainly going to need other people to help them. I'll come back to that in a more specific thing in a moment. Marty also mentioned, this is what academics do, right? They study these things and they come up with the insights that perhaps the most important thing of the web in education is connectivity, not delivering stuff, it's connecting people together. I would actually echo that one, actually. Another remark, this one again from Adrian. That particular session I thought was very valuable to the academics amongst us. That the data shows us what works and what doesn't work. We've almost never had that before in education. We've had to rely upon student surveys at the end of the class. And by and large, they tended to complain about your dress sense or whether you shaved in the morning, if you're a guy or whatever. So we just didn't get the right kind of information, but now we do get a lot of information, and we have to eat that information, and sometimes it's unpalatable. That's a personal comment. No one mentioned it earlier. Then Esther Wojcicki, the high school teacher from Palo Alto High School, made a lot of remarks that I thought were very pertinent. She was really stressing the need for human interaction. We have to encourage and support the human interaction because, as she pointed out, it's when people talk with people and question each other and help each other out that the actual learning takes place. She pointed to the fact that there's this tendency to see technology as putting a kid in front of an iPad screen and that they're learning by interaction. And as someone who's built an app to do just that, I'm sympathetic with what can be done with that. But what needs to go around that kind of thing is the need to have scaffolding and help for teachers so that teachers can react to that and work in an environment where kids do that. So the need to help teachers learn how to take advantage of that. This is going to be a huge problem, especially if we want to take technology devices, take the technologies into the schools and blend it with the school learning. The teachers are going to need a lot of help as to how to use those technologies. They're very good at using textbooks and other things. They're going to have to learn how to react to and react with the various interactive devices that kids have. I also liked Adrian's nice remark, which is one of these things I'll probably repeat at the party when there's nobody from this room present, so I can take the credit. Is that the need for assessment at scale, we really need now to adopt the Uber model. My own MOOC has always had peer review, it's an integral part of it. My MOOC, like several MOOCs, is designed to be interactive, to encourage group collaboration. It's always had peer evaluation, and so the need to develop and improve the Uber model for evaluating and interacting in higher education. And I think those were the only ones that I starred. I made a lot of other notes. One more I thought was this was June Breivik about the Norway model. The takeaway from June's remark about what happened when the government changed is that when you're talking about technology and education, top-down models are probably not going to work. I mean, the thing about technology is it's democratizing. The individual person's in control, that device is in their hand. They decide when to use it, when not to use it. So anything that looks like top-down is just not going to work. You've really got to think of it as a consumer model and work in it that way. So even if you're a teacher, you probably do have to think of the class as TAMs.
Thank you, Keith. So, Peter, it's unfair, I know, but from your position as head of research at Google, could I ask you to sort of follow up on Keith's reflection, just in general? What is the takeaway that you're going out with after the conference?
I left my notebook back in my seat, so I won't give you as much detail as Keith did, but rather I'll give you kind of an overall gestalt of my feeling about today. But before I do that, let me tell you what my feelings were 5 years ago. At that time, I was feeling a terrible burden, that I looked out at the field of education and said, we have a great opportunity here. We can move from getting feedback on students once a year and very slowly changing and evolving to this instantaneous feedback that we can get with computer technologies. And we should be able to do much more rapid prototyping and turnaround and continual improvement. And nobody's doing that. And now there's a burden, so it's up to me to jump in and try to do that. So that's what I was feeling then, and I tried to do my small bit. And I can say what I'm feeling today after being at meetings like this is an incredible feeling of relief that I'm off the hook. because so many of you understand everything that I thought that I understood and thought that people weren't working on, and now I see so much of it, so much good work going on, that I could take the rest of the decade off, and you guys got it covered, so we're all good. I guess a couple other things I saw, one was the emphasis, we just had the panel on corporate training, and so this wider range of saying education is not just what happens in the classroom, that it happens in lots of different places, and it happens for very specific purposes as well. So I thought that was very welcome. And it just seemed like there were a lot of people talking about broader places to think about what learning is. And then the other part of it Keith touched on was the notion of community, of interaction with people. I think of it as the teacher's role being more one of motivation rather than information, that we have so many places to get the information from, but the role of the teacher is to get people to want to interact with the information. I can say in my role as a textbook author and as a MOOC teacher, I've had dozens and dozens of people come up to me and say, oh, thank you very much, I took your class online, or I used your book in my college class, and thanks for that opportunity. And I think it's once per decade, I had somebody come up to me and said, I bought your book and read it on my own outside of an organized class, right? So all the information is there, and anybody could do it at any time, but we don't, right? We have that opportunity, but we only do it when the right social structure is in place, and when there's other people that are doing it too, and we can join up with them, or there's a teacher who's enthusiastic and we can follow along. So the information is commonplace, and yes, we got to do a better job. We got to have better pedagogy and better information, and we can refine it and improve it. But what really makes the difference between someone engaging or not is this personal connection.
Okay. So if I can ask you to kind of follow up on the same line a little bit, going back to, I believe there was a TED Talk that you did in 2012 in Los Angeles, which is kind of pointing back to the first MOOC that you did with Sebastian's run. When you think back to that time, and you think about the sort of the surprise maybe and what happened there, could you just relate a little bit more to us of the story, the experience that was for you? I mean, this was as new for you as it was for anybody else, and that must have been a tremendous surprise and experience for you as an instructor, as a teacher as well. Could you just tell us a little bit about what was that like back then?
Yeah, so it certainly was a surprise. So Sebastian and I had taught the sort of a regular traditional class at Stanford, and we thought that had gone pretty well. And then Stanford asked us back the next semester. Sort of somebody else was supposed to teach the course, but it fell through, so they called us back, and we said, sure, we'll do it again. But we said, well, this time, since we just did it, we feel pretty confident. We don't have to change the material that much, so let's make a challenge to ourselves and say, can we also develop material and put it online and make it available to anybody? And so we thought that that's the thing we should do. Sebastian said, and we could get like 5,000 people could see it. And I said, well, you're always too optimistic, Sebastian. We'll probably get a couple thousand, but 5,000 might be pushing it. And then it took off, and we didn't quite understand why, and other people had done similar types of things in the past, but I think it just everything came together at that point in terms of computer technology being available, after many years of being at a point where there's a video in the browser and you press the button, and instead of playing, it asks you to install a plugin. We finally got to the point in 2011 where it would actually play most of the time. And for some reason, that was a turning point, and it's taken off since then.
Thank you. Keith, you have also been doing this for a long time now. I don't know how many MOOCs you run, but it's a number by now.
One MOOC 6 times.
One MOOC 6 times. And when you were with us in Norway the first time, and I think it was one MOOC 2 times, something like that. What are the most important things for an educator putting a MOOC together to think through? What is the big difference from a more traditional way of teaching, in your point of view, in your experience?
Well, the main difference is the first thing is you have to take your discipline and what it is you're trying to do with the discipline. I was taking higher level mathematics, entering into university level mathematics. And that means that's the stage where students come from procedural, bite-sized bits of mathematics in high school to learning how to solve a problem that might take them a week to solve. And I was trying to do that in the space of a 10-week MOOC. So I had to actually ignore the rapidly growing wisdom of a lot of MOOCs, which is you morselize it, you bite-size it, because things have to come in big chunks. In fact, one of the things my course was designed to do was to force the student who stays in it to slow down, because mathematics is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You have to be there till the end. You've got to pace yourself, you've got to learn to reflect all the time. So I was actually going counter in many ways deliberately to do that. I also realized it depended hugely on feedback, both peer feedback and expertise, and we had to outsource the expertise to the MOOC platforms. So there were a lot of issues, but really what that boils down to is saying, what is the pedagogy that's necessary? And you have to be careful whether it's necessary or just you're not used to it. The necessary pedagogy to put that course out there. I just took years of experience of teaching mathematics at university level and said, here's the things that we have to use. Let's put them on. Now, as I learned, that wasn't exactly the same MOOC 6 times. It kept iterating and iterating as now it's a staple point. But I actually think you have to take account of the discipline before you sort of listen to the dictates of the medium. The discipline has to be the lead, because that's what you're trying to get across. And in the case of mathematics, it's learned with a mixture of private reflection and social interaction, and all of that was important. Having said that, and having not commented so far about the afternoon talks, particularly the one from Microsoft, I was actually listening and taking notes intently, because I think if you want to prepare people for university mathematics, which is what I was trying to do, you need to have the approach I do, because part of the process is that people changing their approach to mathematics to one that's reflection and reasoning over time rather than answering questions. But for most people in the world, they don't need mathematical problem-solving ability, they need mathematically informed problem-solving ability. So what I'm now thinking of, and there's a sort of a conversation should be going on with EdCast, and it began, and then I got sidetracked with other things, is actually building a version of that kind of course, which isn't so much aimed at sort of mathematical content, mathematical thinking, but mathematically inspired thinking in the real world. And so I've actually been looking for insight from the people in the industrial side, with the MOOCs, the corporate MOOCs, as to how you would take mathematical thinking in a real world, everyday setting, and actually boil it down to things that can be delivered in a way that really takes advantage of mobile technologies. And that's an interesting new idea, because I don't think anyone's really trying to do something quite like that before. But that's what I'm thinking about now.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few minutes to reflect on here, and I'm thinking that one of the things that are coming out of the discussions today is that there are so many opportunities, there are so many technologies, there are so many ways that these things can be done. And from the point of view of being an educator in a university in a fairly different setting than what we're in right here now, there's the sense that there are lots of bottlenecks. There are lots of, and I hate to be negative or sort of pessimistic, but there are certain bottlenecks to be realistic that we have to deal with and that we have to confront. So I want to ask you both that. Could you reflect a little bit on how do you see that? What are, if you look at higher education, what are the bottlenecks that you can think of that are the most important to address? Could I ask you first, Peter?
Yeah. I guess for me, the biggest bottleneck is this notion that you're in college for 4 years. It just seems crazy. Right? That maybe at some point that was a reasonable way to do it, but now people are living longer, there's more to learn, things change faster, and this notion that you go for 4 years and then you get a stamp saying, I'm done, I don't have to ever learn anything again, doesn't seem right. And so if we're going to break that up and say we're going to need lifelong learning anyways, then maybe we should focus less on those 4 years altogether. Maybe we can integrate them more with the rest of your life and with experiences, you know, traveling or interacting with the community or doing volunteer work or interning and being home and not necessarily being on campus, maybe being on campus part of the time. I think there's room for a lot more variety in the models if you don't see the 4 years as the be-all and end-all.
Thank you. You, Keith, any other comments to that same question?
Well, yes, anyone who's given a MOOC in particular realizes that they're incredibly powerful for scaling up education for an audience who know how to learn, who are motivated how to learn, and have all of the metacognitive skills to work that way. Which is why most of the students in my MOOC actually have a master's degree, very often in working in Silicon Valley. So they're incredibly good at scaling up for that kind of an audience. But to get to that point, to create the student who knows how to learn, is motivated to learn, and knows why they want to learn and has reasons for learning, that I don't see technology doing that. That I think you just have to go back to old-fashioned, either parents or peers or teachers. So I don't think any of this is replacing stuff that's worked for 2,000 years. It's enhancing it and preparing people for the lifelong learning, because once people are prepared and able to learn for themselves, with or without any help along the way, and most people need help, until we've reached that, we can't really take advantage of the technology. Once that's cracked, once people can do it, then the technologies really can come into force.
Okay. So let's take the same question and kind of roll back a little bit and reflect on K-12, on young kids, small people.
I have a product, my first product out aimed precisely at middle school kids and younger. It's game-based, because I think if you want to go to that age, you need two things. First, you want to have genuine engagement. That means video games is the obvious way to go in, games and puzzles, if you want to get a technology product out there. But you also need to be able to get the teachers on board. From my perspective, with my own little startup company, the biggest challenge we face is if we want our products to get into the classrooms and be used in the classrooms, which we do, we're going to have to help the teachers to get there, because it's alien to many of the teachers. Even the teachers that have grown up in the video game age are not used to be able to use video games within a learning environment, because that whole business has to be developed.
Okay. Peter, can I ask you the same comment on the same?
Yeah. So I think it's more the same idea of more personal engagement rather than technical or content engagement. And so we need to, students need to learn to grow up, and only secondarily are they learning some information. And we've got to continue to do that. And I think, as Keith says, it's not technology that does that, it's the social structure. For me, one of the things I've been involved with a little is in STEM education, and particularly computer science. And at the K-12 level, some of the kids do great, but the teachers tend not to. And you know, they're afraid of the new technology, they don't have the background. There's also a bit of a problem that sometimes you train up a teacher in computer science, and then they say, hey, I could make a lot more money someplace else, and they disappear. So we need some ways to bring that in and to have the right teachers or role models, or maybe ways to connect with mentors in order to teach these fields that the K-12 teachers may not have a lot of experience in.
Okay. So I have one final question actually coming from me, and then we'll see what time there might be. But as I mentioned earlier this morning, I teach in Uganda. I teach in a university that has vastly different resources, meaning much less in the way of resources. I teach students that are on their way in terms of access to technologies. They come from families that do not. They have internet access at the university, but not at home, and so on. You can go on and on and on. But if you look at this from that point of view of internationalization or globalization of education, could I ask you to comment just a little bit on what we've heard about today in terms of that global challenge? Mike was into this, he commented on that, but I think that would be kind of a meaningful roundup here. What are the global challenges that we can think of as last-minute comments here. Maybe you can go first, Peter.
Well, we heard some about some of the work going on in India, and I think that's really, to me, the most interesting place to look, because it's where the largest efforts are going on. There's a huge need, and there seems to be willpower from the top, from the government and from some of the companies there, to make a big push to get the country better educated. And I don't think it's any one thing, right? So I think there's a lot of experiments going on, and when you have a large population like that, you can do very large pilot studies, and you can do a lot of different ones and test what works.
Okay, thank you.
So my own institute, H-Star, which is one of the hosts of this conference, has a big ongoing project funded by USAID in Africa called Resilient Africa Network, which is designed to develop sustainable, innovative structures in Africa, throughout Africa. And it began, the money I think was given to us largely because of the MOOCs, because people thought, oh, we could just stream this knowledge, we could get lots of people from the business school at Stanford putting stuff out on the MOOC, and it would just go into Africa. I don't know how they would see it, because there isn't bandwidth in many of these places, but that was a naive idea. What that became once the project got going was taking elements of online education, bits from MOOCs and so forth. I think we even use the word MOOClet at various stages. But so material is prepared and goes out. And so, but I think what's really driving that is one of the people here, and people from other universities involved in this project, actually goes out and travels around Africa all the time on a regular basis. From our case, it's Pani Banerjee, who's connected with H-Star and the D School. And so what we're doing is we're not shipping videos out on DVDs, we're shipping people out on airplanes from place to place to place at intervals, and in between that the technology works. So the technology works in between the people, but what drives it are the people going out and actually doing workshops in classrooms with these sort of little MOOClets. So it's a blend of traditional distance education, but in this case I think it's important that the person goes out in person, literally goes out. It's not a video link. That person is there to interact in a group in one location. And so it's a blend of two extremes, personalized learning and at-scale learning.
Okay, thank you. We have, I think, time for one or two questions. Let's limit this to two questions, but I would like to open up a little bit. It makes sense. So I have to Elif.
Yeah, Peter, Odgar asked you to reflect on the conference. I was wondering if you can reflect a little bit on what you have seen in terms of the dialogue in higher education to MOOCs and online learning from where you sit since 2012, and positive or negative in terms of the things you've seen out there, and if that makes you optimistic for the future. Thank you.
I guess we've seen the typical technology cycle, right, where you start off with getting excited news articles saying, here's this new technology that's going to solve everything, and then when you finish writing those, you have to write something different, so then you write something about how it's now failed and wasn't the answer. And I think the truth is more complicated, and part of the reason it's complicated is because of this M in massive, right? So you shouldn't expect there to be one answer. You should expect lots of different things, right? So yes, you can reach people in 195 countries all at once, and that's an amazing and good thing. On the other hand, a lot of people are from the US, and yes, you can reach 13-year-olds, but on the other hand, in my class and in Keith's, most of them are professionals with bachelor's or master's degrees. So it's both narrow, and it's wide, and it's everything else. And I think that's hard for journalists to get around, because they want to write something that can be summarized in a headline and not something that takes a long report to get all the details.
Okay, thank you. So we said two questions, and there are actually more, but I think we need to limit it to two. And Kent, I think you were second in line. Okay, sorry.
Peter, in the context of what you experience at Google, in the context of this conference, what is the modality that most learning takes place inside Google?
I guess there's a lot of things. So probably most learning is informal, people in the same room sitting down and solving a problem together. We also have a wide range of formal programs, similar to some of the stuff we heard about from the panel here on corporate training. So we hire traditional instructors to come in front of a classroom. We develop online materials, some of them MOOC-like, some of them more laboratory-like. Here's something you can work through, do these steps, see if you can get it to work. You know, variety of different modalities there, some of them just videos, some of them workshops. So I think we're experimenting with all of them, and then we're trying to track a little bit and see what works and doesn't work.
Thank you. Okay, so this was just a small taste of a conversation we realized should have gone on for a long time. But that's how it is. We've had a whole day, and this is about the time we have, and we need to close this down. But I would like to thank both Peter and Keith for attempting to help take us a little bit down here. And for those of you who might be interested, they will both be with us at next year's conference. We were asked to give you the dates. I didn't do that, but it's June 13 until June 16 next year, and more information will be made available on your emails. But I want to thank you for having
So, Norvig, just one quick point. This is not the end of the conference. This is the beginning, because you're all, you know, wired into technology. So the whole conference is continuing virtually, and you all have access. Everyone, I think, part of, besides discussion, one of the biggest takeaway for me when I go to conferences is to know and to meet and know new people. So everyone should know everyone here, and so if, because of the limited time, if you didn't get a chance to meet or exchange business cards, actually the virtual summit is the best place to say hi and connect with each other and have discussions over there. And we should continue that discussion until the next conference at the beautiful location that Artgear is inviting us. So plan for that. I want to thank once again to all the speakers and all the participants. It was a great conversation, very good engagement. And special thanks to Keith and Artgear and Zephyr Institute, everyone involved, as well as our sponsor partners, which is Norwegian Consulate. What's the Norwegian Consulate? Over there, yeah. And then we have US India Business Council, which is not here, and Surigo, and then there were a few others. But thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you again very soon.